Put on headphones and sit in a quiet place. Let's start our story.
The Sinister Sanctuary. Next door. In a quaint, picturesque neighborhood, Sarah had recently moved into a charming old house. Her neighbor, Mr. Johnson, lived in the Victorian mansion next door, a grand and imposing structure that seemed to carry an air of mystery. Initially, Mr. Johnson appeared to be a friendly and helpful neighbor, always willing to lend a hand with yard work or household chores. However, as the weeks passed, Sarah began to notice subtle signs that something was amiss. Late at night, she would occasionally catch a glimpse of movement outside her bedroom window. A shadowy figure would stand beneath the streetlight, peering into her room. Terrified, Sarah started locking all her doors and windows, but the unnerving visits continued. She finally decided to contact the local police and share her concerns. Upon investigating, the police uncovered a disturbing truth about Mr. Johnson. He had a long history of similar incidents in different neighborhoods. His basement was a chilling trove of photographs and videos of his neighbors, documenting their most private moments. It turned out he had been spying on and stalking his neighbors for years. The community was left in shock and disbelief, their sense of security shattered by the revelation of the sinister secret their seemingly friendly neighbor had hidden. The Hidden Chamber of Nightmares. Lisa and her family had moved into a beautiful old house nestled in a historic part of town. Their neighbor, Mr. Smith, had been a fixture in the neighborhood for decades. Lisa's son, Danny, quickly became friends with Mr. Smith's grandson, Timmy. They spent their days playing together and exploring the area. One afternoon, while rummaging in Mr. Smith's basement, Danny stumbled upon a locked door that piqued his curiosity. Timmy appeared nervous, explaining that they were never allowed to enter that room. Undeterred, Danny decided to investigate further when Timmy wasn't around. He managed to pick the lock, revealing a hidden chamber that sent shivers down his spine. Inside the room, Danny discovered a disturbing collection of old photographs, newspaper clippings, and handwritten journals. They detailed unsolved disappearances, mysterious accidents, and local tragedies spanning decades. Frightened by his discovery, Danny shared his findings with his parents, who decided to contact the authorities. As the investigation unfolded, it became apparent that Mr. Smith had been harboring a dark secret for years. He had been keeping meticulous records of the tragedies that had befallen the neighborhood, fueling suspicions that he may have had a hand in some of them. The community was left horrified by the revelation. Mr. Smith's seemingly benign presence turned out to be a facade hiding a deeply disturbed individual. 3. The Eerie Nocturnal Neighbor. Sarah and Mark moved into a cozy apartment building in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Their neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, lived in the unit next door and appeared to be a pleasant, albeit somewhat reclusive, elderly woman. The couple settled into their new home, initially enjoying the peace and tranquility of their surroundings. However, as the weeks went by, they started noticing strange occurrences late at night. Muffled cries and eerie whispers emanated from Mrs. Thompson's apartment, unsettling them deeply. They tried to ignore it at first, attributing the sounds to their imagination or creaky pipes. But as the unsettling noises continued, their concern grew. One night, unable to bear it any longer, Sarah and Mark decided to investigate further. They placed their ears against the shared wall, straining to make out the whispered words. What they heard chilled them to the bone. Mrs. Thompson seemed to be muttering incoherent incantations and speaking of dark rituals. Terrified, they called the police, who arrived promptly to assess the situation. When they entered Mrs. Thompson's apartment, they discovered a hidden door leading to a small, dimly lit basement room. Inside the room, the police found restraints, disturbing tools, and an array of occult paraphernalia. It turned out that Mrs. Thompson had been luring unsuspecting individuals into her apartment, where she subjected them to unspeakable horrors. Her apartment was a macabre chamber of torture and occult practices. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community, leaving Sarah and Mark traumatized by the realization that their seemingly harmless neighbor was a malevolent force lurking next door. These true stories serve as chilling reminders that beneath the facade of normalcy, some neighbors hide the darkest secrets imaginable, turning what should be safe and familiar into something utterly terrifying.